All right, what's up everybody? Welcome to my YouTube channel. So today one of the things I'm going to talk about is buying rental property with something called equity financing. There's a lot of content on YouTube about buying houses with no money and no credit. And yes, you can do that. And I have bought houses with no money and no credit in the past. And one very effective strategy is called equity financing. It's been in use for a long time. It's very common in commercial transactions. And to simplify this concept and make it as basic as I can, if you've ever watched Shark Tank, when those entrepreneurs go and they pitch the investors like Kevin O'Leary, really more often than not what they're doing is they're selling equity in their companies for money. And at a very high level, at a very basic level, that's basically what this equity financing is. Now the difference is for a real estate investor is that if you find a house that has equity in it, you need to buy the house and you need to finance the purchase of the house. A lot of times that can be the purchase of that property and the renovation costs can be financed through selling equity in the property. Now there's going to be certain basic criteria that's going to have to be met. Normally the investor that's going to finance the purchase and the rehab, they're going to need to make sure that there's enough equity in this property so if they had to foreclose for any reason they would not lose money. So let me give you an example. About in the mid-teens, came across a property where the seller was about 4 or 5 months behind on the mortgage. So what I had to do was about $5,000 in arrears, so $5,000 there. About $7,500 in renovations for carpet, paint, punch list. So then there was some closing costs. So let's say it's about, I'm just going to round that up to an even number. So about $15,000 to buy this house. Now that's just $15,000 to bring the mortgage current, to renovate the house and to pay all the closing costs. It would not finance the entire purchase of the house, but the seller was allowed me to buy it subject to their existing mortgage. And what I did was make the payments bring it current, then make the payments on the mortgage. So I took over the existing mortgage there. But the other thing was at the time to invest $15,000 in a rental property was just not good for me in the mid-teens. It was since I was still building my buying machine, my websites, my marketing and everything like that. So what I did was I sold a 50% interest in the property for that $15,000. Now, the property that was purchased in the mid-teens, at the time, the numbers were approximately a mortgage balance of about $100,000. The value of the property was about $130,000, somewhere around there. Just because I found a local lender that was also a real estate investor and had money in their IRAs that needed to be deployed and working and earning interest. They were willing to loan me the $15,000 in exchange for a 50% equity stake in this property, and we agreed that the property would be sold within 10 years. So what that looks like is if we were to sell now, if I were to decide to sell that property now, the mortgage has paid down from that $100,000 to about $88,000. And the property is worth about $200,000. So now what you have is an equity spread. So that's about $110,000 right there. We would split that. Now, you have to keep in mind that the investor has to get their $15,000 back. And then they're going to get that $55,000 plus their $15,000 back. And to give up that amount of equity at sale, they're getting a good deal. So the return is well over 100% within that 10-year period. So this type of equity financing, this is an example of equity financing that can be utilized to buy a house with no money down, no credit, because to buy it subject to the existing mortgage, I did not have to apply for the loan. The only thing I had to do was bring them current, renovate the house, and then get a paying tenant in there. So I'm not going to go too deep into the numbers in this video, but this is a typical example of how you can buy a house with no money down and without having credit. So it's a legitimate strategy. Now, subject to investing is an advanced strategy, and I'm not going to get into it in this video. But when you think about these types of situations, and you go to your local REIT and you start networking with other investors, or if you're active on the real estate investing circuit nationally in the United States, you start hearing names like Pete Fortunato and Eddie Speed, Dykes Boddiford, and a lot of these guys that have been doing these types of deals for decades. You find lots of lenders that are more than happy to participate in this type of a deal. Networking with like-minded investors, this is a good alternative to something like the BRRRR strategy, because you don't have to build up a stockpile of cash to buy this type of a deal. Keep in mind that when you turn around to sell this property in 10 years, I know a lot of people are skeptical about buying houses with no money and no credit, but it's a deal that a lot of investors like myself would be happy to participate in as a lender, because the returns are worth it. But not only that, think about it in the long run. For that my investor, for that $15,000 investment, they're going to turn that $15,000 into probably $55,000 inside of 10 years. It's probably even more, because right now that deal is about 8 years old. Keep in mind the returns that we're looking at here. They can easily take a $15,000 investment and turn it to $55,000, perhaps even $100,000. Overall, it is a good investment. It is very low risk, and it's a way to buy houses truly with no money down and no credit. Now, equity financing is just one form of financing for these properties, and the deal that I just described to you is more of a form of subject to financing and equity financing, sort of stacked together. A lot of ways to buy houses with no money out of pocket and no credit, and this is just one of those ways. I learned a lot of these types of techniques from people like Pete Fortunato and Jack Miller. Jack Miller's dead now, but Dykes Boddiford, and there's still guys like Bill Cook who are very active on the circuit and are very active in these types of deals. But you can, yes, it's true. Yes, you can buy houses with no money and no credit. The strategy that I've adopted is pooled my money together year over year and gradually built a capital reserve to be able to buy houses with some money and now with great credit, and it really gives me access to more deals. So I can still buy houses with no money and no credit, but I don't have to. So now, on the purchase side, am I going to sell a 50% equity stake in a deal? Only if it's a really big deal that requires a lot of capital. Normally on these small 3-2, 1,200 square foot ranches, I would just fund the deal myself, so as not to have to give up that 50% equity in that 10-year period. Because equity financing, even though it is very low risk and you don't have to use your own money and you don't have to use your own credit, it is expensive in the long run, but it's still a very legitimate and a very effective. So there's gonna be a lot more of these videos coming out. Like it. Subscribe to the channel, and I'm sure you guys are going to have questions about this kind of a transaction, so post them in the comments section. Now we'll answer those questions as quickly as I can. I'll see you guys soon.